The story begins not with a neighbor's rumor or an eerie sound, but with paperwork. In early spring of 2023, while the property was still technically unoccupied, a utility contractor was called to review irregular billing at a residence in Clark County, Nevada, a house that once belonged to Lou Rawls. At first glance, the house appeared ordinary. The stucco exterior showed mild sun fading. The iron gate at the driveway bore spots of rust, and the swimming pool had gathered a faint layer of desert dust. From the street, it looked like any other vacant listing awaiting new life. But when the contractor compared the February and March 2023 electricity bills, something stood out immediately. Both statements showed unusual spikes of energy use between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. On February 18th, the house had consumed nearly 6 times the daily average. Despite being empty, its thermostat locked in vacant mode. A nearly identical spike reappeared on March 3rd. The contractor visited the site to confirm whether the meters were faulty. The breaker box, mounted in the garage wall, bore inspection stickers dating back to 2015. He logged the readings at 11:47 a.m., then walked through the quiet rooms with a flashlight. No humming appliances, no tripped circuits. The pool pump was off. The air smelled faintly of dust and dry carpet, not the warmth of a house lived in. And yet, there was something peculiar about the garage wall itself. Behind a row of stacked moving boxes, someone had left markings in pencil. Straight lines, dimensions, and faint words written in block letters. They seemed to outline a small room, not much more than 6 by 10 feet, pressed behind the studio wall. According to county records, no such room existed. That same week, a neighbor named Mrs. Alvarez, who had lived across the cul-de-sac since the late 1990s, agreed to speak about the property. Her words were careful, measured, as if she had already repeated them more than once. "I've seen the upstairs hallway light on," she said, "sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning. But the driveway is empty. No cars, no deliveries. Just the light and then, the next night, nothing." By the end of March, the evidence collected electricity surges, blueprint markings, neighbors' testimony painted a picture of a property that was active in ways it should not have been. The investigation was no longer about whether the house was empty, but about what could account for the signals of movement in a place officially without occupants. The house sat at the quiet end of a cul-de-sac in Clark County, shielded from the main road by a stretch of mesquite trees and a low brick wall. From a distance, there was nothing remarkable about it. Pale stucco walls, terracotta roof tiles, and windows shuttered against the desert sun. Yet anyone who lingered longer than a glance might notice the absence of life: the dry lawn, the mailbox collecting real estate flyers, the faint squeak of the front gate's hinge that hadn't been oiled in months. When the contractor arrived that March morning, clipboard tucked under his arm, he expected a routine inspection. The electricity bills had been flagged only because of accounting inconsistencies. Most vacant homes run steady, predictable lines of consumption, a trickle of power for the security system, maybe a small refrigerator left running, nothing more. But here, the bills suggested something else entirely. On February 18th at 2:17 a.m., the draw across the system had surged as though the entire house had been switched on at once: every light, the pool filter, even the exterior cameras. The spike lasted 4 hours before returning to baseline. On March 3rd at 2:12 a.m., nearly the same event repeated, down to the minute. Whoever or whatever caused the usage was consistent, patterned. He started in the garage, where the main panel was mounted. Dust covered the floor in a thin gray sheet, broken only by his own footprints and those of a small rodent that had crossed near the water heater. The breaker box itself was intact, its inspection sticker from 2015 curling at the edges. He ran his gloved hand along the surface and noticed something odd. Faint lines drawn in pencil across the drywall nearby. They weren't random doodles. They formed rectangles, dimensions written in faded script: 6 feet here, 10 feet there, like someone had once planned a wall or an enclosed space. At the bottom edge, barely visible, was a single word: storage. But county records listed no additional storage room. The official blueprints, digitized years ago, showed nothing but open garage space. The contractor took a photo with his phone, noted the coordinates in his log, and moved on. Inside the house, silence pressed against the walls. The air smelled of carpet fibers and plaster. In the studio at the far left wing, the faint remnants of acoustic foam clung to the walls, yellowing at the edges. The living room still carried echoes of music, not actual sound, but the kind of resonance you imagine when standing in a space where voices once gathered. On the right wing, the hallway stretched unervingly long, lined with mirrors that reflected his figure back at him again and again. He flicked his flashlight across each room, but the light caught only emptiness. Bare walls, closets stripped clean, blinds rattling faintly where the window didn't quite seal. Later that afternoon, when he returned to his truck, he noticed Mrs. Alvarez, the neighbor across the street, watching quietly from her porch. She was in her late 60s, her silver hair tied back, her small dog nestled at her feet. When approached, she hesitated, then spoke in the cautious tone of someone repeating something she wasn't sure would be believed. "I see the light," she said simply. "The hallway, upstairs, is on some nights, off on others. But there's no car in the drive. Nobody coming or going. Just the light, like someone's pacing back and forth." She pressed her lips together after saying it, almost as though she'd already shared too much. By the time the contractor filed his report, he included not only the billing data but also a note about possible unauthorized activity on premises. Yet there were no signs of forced entry, no alarms triggered. Everything remained locked. That evening, as the sun set behind the Nevada hills, the house stood in silhouette, dark and empty to anyone passing by. But on the electrical logs stored in the utility system, the meter spun faster than it should have, as though the house itself were breathing in the middle of the night. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The unusual bills and neighbor testimony drew the attention of the property's listing agent, who worried about liability. By late April 2023, a small investigative team was allowed access. They weren't ghost hunters or sensationalists, just a pair of building inspectors and an electrician contracted to verify whether the wiring posed a safety risk. They began with a timeline of activity. Using the utility company's smart meter logs, they reconstructed 2 nights in particular. February 18, 2023, 2:17 a.m. power spike measured across the main panel. Consumption equal to roughly 30 light fixtures plus a pool motor running simultaneously. March 3, 2023, 2:12 a.m. Identical spike, lasting 4 hours, with sudden drop-off at 6:16 a.m. sharp. The inspector's notes describe this as synchronized draw, not random fluctuation. Walking through the property in daylight, they mapped the layout on fresh graph paper, cross-referencing with official blueprints. The studio wall still nagged at them. The penciled markings in the garage suggested a small, rectangular room, yet the county records showed nothing. They tapped on the drywall with a rubber mallet. A hollow echo followed in one patch, different from the solid thud elsewhere. One of the inspectors ran his finger along the baseboard and discovered a thin seam that didn't match the rest. It wasn't conclusive. Homes are often remodeled without permits, especially in the 1980s. But it added to the unease. A wall that sounded thinner than it should, concealing something not reflected on paper. Over the following weeks, 2 more neighbors were interviewed. Mr. Castillo, who jogged the cul-de-sac most mornings at 5:30 a.m., mentioned that he occasionally saw the porch light flicker on just before dawn. "It's always quick, just a few seconds, then off. I figured it was on a timer, but it never matches the same time." The Park family, who moved in across the street in 2019, told the listing agent's assistant, "Our security camera picked up motion once, around 2:15 a.m. in February, just a blur of light near the upstairs window. We thought it was reflection, but the curtains inside were closed." Both statements were logged but not treated as hard evidence. People misremember times. Cameras glitch, reflections mislead. Still, the consistency of the reports, the same hours, the same windows, gave weight to the timeline. To keep the investigation grounded, the inspectors carried out 2 controlled tests. Breaker load simulation. At 9:45 p.m., they flipped every breaker in the house to on, activating lights, pool motor, and appliances simultaneously. The draw matched almost exactly what the utility logs had shown in February and March. Conclusion: someone could have deliberately switched the entire system on during those hours. But who and why in an empty property? Reflection check: they positioned a car on the street and ran headlights across the upper windows. At certain angles, the mirrors in the hallway amplified the glare, creating the illusion of lights turning on inside. This could explain Mrs. Alvarez's claim, but not the power bill spikes, which required actual usage, not just the appearance of it. The most compelling piece of evidence emerged almost by accident. In November 2023, a delivery contractor dropped a package at the front porch. The doorbell camera, though linked to an inactive account, was still archiving audio to the security company's cloud. When retrieved, the clip played as follows. 6:42 p.m., the bell chimes, echoing in the vacant hallway. A pause of 6 seconds. Then, faint but clear, the sound of a male voice humming. Low, resonant, almost like the opening bars of a blues phrase. No footsteps followed. No door opened. Just humming, then silence. Forensic technicians reviewed the file and found no evidence of splice or contamination. It wasn't a trick of wind or static. It was human, or at least human-like. By the end of 2023, the picture looked divided. The surges could be explained as intentional tampering, the lights as mere reflections, the blueprints as outdated drafts. Each detail had a rational path. And yet, when stacked together, the pattern refused to dissolve. The investigators agreed to suspend judgment. "We can't rule out trespassing," one report read. "But we also can't explain why trespassing would follow such precise hours, nor why no physical evidence of entry exists." The house remained on the market, its rooms silent during the day, its windows dark at dusk. But at 2:12 a.m., the utility logs still marked faint activity, as though someone inside hadn't yet learned the house had been left behind. By early 2024, after nearly 2 years of sitting dormant, the property finally found new owners. A couple in their 40s who had relocated from California. Their names were kept out of public record for privacy, but neighbors recalled them arriving in a silver SUV, unloading boxes steadily over the course of 2 weekends. From the outside, the house transformed quickly, the lawn trimmed, blinds adjusted, a faint glow from the kitchen window at dinner time. For the first time in years, it looked alive. But the move-in did not erase the lingering strangeness. Within their first month, the couple began noticing details that were hard to dismiss. At first, it was small, domestic things. The husband reported that the microwave clock would reset at 2:13 a.m., flashing 12 o'clock as if the power had been cut for a split second. He woke one morning to find the oven display frozen at the same time, down to the minute. He checked the neighborhood grid, no outages. The power company confirmed stable delivery during those hours. The wife described a more unsettling moment. While organizing boxes in the garage, she noticed the faint pencil markings the contractor had logged nearly a year earlier. Unlike before, she swore the letters were darker now, as if recently traced over. She ran her finger along the line and came away with faint smudges of graphite. She asked her husband if he'd been sketching there. He hadn't. They brought it up with the real estate agent, who brushed it off. Old plans. People sketch things all the time during remodels. But she admitted she couldn't explain why a wall sounded hollow when tapped, or why the blueprints didn't match. By late February, the couple had begun keeping a log. It started as a joke, a notebook left on the kitchen counter titled House Quirks. But within weeks, the notes grew more precise, written with timestamps and terse descriptions. February 9th, 2:15 a.m., bedroom lamp flickered 3 times. Unplugged it. February 18th, 2:12 a.m., heard humming in hallway. Thought it was outside, but windows shut. February 23rd, 2:14 a.m., security camera notification. No motion detected on playback, but timestamp matches surge. The most unnerving entry came on March 3rd, 2024, almost exactly 1 year after the first major surge was recorded by the utility company. At 2:12 a.m., both spouses were awake, lying in bed. The digital alarm clock froze, its numbers burning steady. At that same moment, The upstairs hallway light, a fixture they rarely used, flared on for several seconds before snapping back to darkness. The wife went to check the switch. It was still in the off position. The couple called in two specialists, an electrician and a security consultant. The electrician ran load tests and confirmed that the main breaker was capable of creating minor surges. He chalked the clock resets up to phantom loads from aging wiring. His explanation was reasonable, but when pressed about why the anomalies always happened within minutes of 2:12 a.m., he had no answer beyond coincidence. The security consultant suggested the possibility of wireless interference. He argued that smart systems, especially cameras and connected appliances, can misfire if signals from nearby properties overlap. The couple lived in a cul-de-sac with heavy Wi-Fi use. Maybe the humming sound on the doorbell recording was audio bleed from another device. It was a comforting idea, if not entirely convincing. In late March, while organizing storage in the attic, the husband found a small cardboard box wedged between insulation. Dust clung to the tape, but the cardboard itself was not brittle, as if it hadn't been there long. Inside were ordinary objects: an old utility invoice, a half-empty notebook, and a cassette tape labeled in blue ink, Lou Rawls. The cassette caught their attention immediately. They didn't own a player, but the handwriting looked careful, deliberate, perhaps from the 1980s. It wasn't eerie by itself. Celebrities leave things behind in houses all the time. But the date on the utility invoice inside the box was what unsettled them most. March 3, 2023. 1 year to the day after the unexplained surge had been logged, and nearly a year before they had even moved in. The couple never told neighbors about the box. They simply tucked it back into the attic and left it there, as if disturbing it further might make things worse. By April, the couple's logbook entries read less like jokes and more like field notes. Their handwriting grew sharper, the entries clipped. April 7th, 2:12 a.m., TV turned on in living room. Remote still on coffee table. April 11th, 2:15 a.m., heard footsteps upstairs. Both of us in bed. April 13th, 2:12 a.m., same surge again. Lights in garage flickered. Each event circled back to the same hour. Each one left no physical trace. No tripped breakers, no open doors. Only patterns. And through it all, the hollow wall in the garage remained untouched. Its faint pencil lines growing no darker, no lighter, just waiting. By the summer of 2024, the couple's logbook had become a thick record of oddities. The pattern was undeniable. Events clustering almost exactly at 2:12 a.m., whether it was lights flaring, appliances resetting, or faint noises in the hallway. They stopped treating it as coincidence. A final inspection was arranged by the county at the owner's request. A structural engineer examined the garage wall, confirming what earlier inspectors had suspected. The resonance did suggest an enclosed cavity, but one filled with dense material. Ground-penetrating radar showed a pocket behind the drywall, not a room, but a recess, possibly created during early construction. Nothing illegal, just undocumented. That explained the phantom storage room. The electrical surges were written off as cycling irregularities. The engineer noted that older homes with extensive wiring for studios often behave unpredictably, particularly when multiple circuits reset together. This aligned with the electrician's earlier theory. The midnight spikes were, in theory, just a quirk of aging infrastructure. Neighbors' reports of phantom lights were also filed under rational causes. Car headlights, early morning joggers with flashlights, and the highly reflective upstairs mirrors all provided plausible explanations. The county report concluded, no evidence of paranormal activity. Anomalies attributable to common electrical and optical phenomena. Yet even with those explanations, one piece of evidence remained stubbornly unfiled: the doorbell audio. The faint, low humming captured in November 2023, echoing back after the bell rang in an empty house, did not match any known interference signature. Audio specialists couldn't replicate it with environmental noise, and it was too distinct to be wind or static. The voice, if it was a voice, remained unclaimed. And then there was the box in the attic. No one could determine how a utility bill dated March 3, 2023, ended up tucked beside an old cassette labeled Lou Rawls. The couple, wary of drawing attention, left the box where it was. To this day, it sits there, sealed again under insulation, acknowledged but untouched. So what can we prove? The electrical spikes have rational explanations: outdated systems, load cycling, and quirks of an aging studio build. The blueprint discrepancies can be tied to undocumented remodel sketches, common in older properties. The neighbor reports can be traced to reflections and environmental illusions. And what remains unclear? The doorbell audio, a distinct male humming, captured without any physical presence recorded. The box in the attic, with its oddly timed invoice and cassette, left without explanation. The final word rests in the balance. The Lou Rawls home is not proven to be haunted, nor is it entirely free from mystery. It sits quietly at the end of its cul-de-sac, inhabited once again, carrying with it layers of history, paperwork, and echoes, some explainable, some not. And at 2:12 a.m., the couple still finds themselves listening, waiting, wondering if silence will hold, or if something else will hum softly through the walls. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.